The dreamer milkmaid. Taking a large container of milk on her head, a milkmaid was on her way for selling it. As her steps were moving toward the market, her inclination toward wealth was being enhanced. A surge of excitement of money by selling the milk was noticeable. She began to dream how she would use that money. She was murmuring the words and moving her hands. Her dream took her in a different world, and she said to herself, the money after selling the milk would be used for purchasing 100 chicks, and when chicks would be fully grown, I would sell them at a good price for buying 2 goats. When the goats would be fully grown, I would sell them to an even better price. Still dreaming, she said to herself, soon I would be able to buy 2 more cows, and I would have a lot of money with a luxurious life. With these happy thoughts, she began to skimp and jump. Suddenly, she tripped and fell. The jug broke, and all the milk split on the ground. No more dream, she cried foolishly. Moral: do not count your chickens before they are hatched. The parched crow. In the scorching hot day, a crow flew for a long time hither and thither, looking for water. He felt too exhausted, almost gave up hope when he couldn't find any water. Suddenly he saw a pitcher in a field. The pitcher had meager water. He found impossible to touch the level of water. He tried again and again but couldn't. But his witty mind got an idea. Looking around, he saw some pebbles. He suddenly started picking up the pebbles one by one, dropping each into the pitcher at the level of the water was moving up. His surge of enthusiasm was also increasing as well. Now the level of water was up enough to touch with his beak. The crow glugged down the water and his thirst was quenched soon. His satiety he got by his wit and idea made him really proud of himself. Moral: one can reach a final destination if one tries hard. Beautiful. The clever lamb and the strong wolf. Once a lamb was taking pleasure of sweet grass at the edge of the field with a flock of sheep. She was enjoying herself so much that she went farther and farther and didn't notice the wolf coming nearer to her. When she was pounced upon by the wolf, the lamb begged him to wait a while and stated when her stomach was full of grass she would be more tastier. Then he could devour her. Finding this a good idea, he sat down and waited. The lamb asked the wolf to permit her to dance so the grass would be digested faster in her stomach. Again the wolf agreed. The dancing lamb got a new idea to make him ring the bell as hard as he could so she could dance even faster. The wolf rang the bell as hard as he could. The shepherd heard the bell ringing and quickly sent his dogs to find the missing lamb. The barking dogs frightened the wolf away and saved the lamb's life. Moral: a little creature can sometimes be dominating. The devious wolf in a sheepskin. Once a wolf found a great difficulty to have a vigilance of the shepherd and his dogs, but one day luckily he found the skin of the sheep that had been flayed and thrown aside, so the wolf, with an agile mind, decided to put it on over its own belt. He strolled down among the sheep. The lambs that belonged to the sheep whose skin the wolf was wearing began to follow the wolf in the sheep's clothing. The lambs which followed the wolf were taken little apart from the flock. Since the wolf found a good opportunity, it soon made a meal of them. For some time he succeeded in deceiving the sheep and enjoying hearty meals. Moral: sometimes a deceptive but witty brain is useful. A pit brimmed with water. Long ago, a pond was dug in a very affluent king, and it was announced that one person from each household would have to bring a glass of milk during the night and pour it into the pond. So the pond should be full of milk by the morning. After receiving the order, everybody went home. One of the denizens of the king made up his mind to take milk, but after pondering after a while he thought, since everyone will bring milk, I could pour water in place of milk because it would be hard to see in the twilight. He quickly poured the water and came back. In the morning the king was astonished to see the pond filled with water only. It so happened that everyone thought like the denizen. I will not pour the milk, someone else will do. Don't neglect your duty. The beautiful rose and the thorny cactus. Once in a beautiful spring rose a pine tree in a forest, looked at the red blossomed rose and said, "What a beautiful flower! I wish I were you." The rose said, "It seems that I am the most beautiful plant." Then the sunflower raised its head and said, "There are many plants, including the rose, which were beautiful." The conceited rose said, looking at the thorny cactus, "What an ugly plant!" Then the rose went ballistic when the pine tree compared the thorns of the rose plant with those of cactus. The rose raged at the cactus to be his neighbor and infuriatingly tried to move his roots away from the cactus but couldn't. Spring passed and life became difficult when in sweltering hot days plants and animals needed water and there was no rainfall. Once the wilted rose saw sparrows stick their beaks into the cactus and then fly away refreshed. The rose got puzzled. The tree explained, "The birds got water from the cactus, that hurts, but the cactus does not like to see any birds suffer." The rose blushed with shame. Moral: never judge anyone by his appearance. Fear of the lion and the elephant. Once upon a time, a discussion was going on between a lion, the king of the forest, and his friend elephant, who was the inhabitant of the same forest. They were talking about their great deeds. Then suddenly the lion disclosed his fear of the crowing of cocks. The elephant started ridiculing him. Just then a small mosquito started circling around the elephant's ears, making him restless and anxious. The elephant was really scared of his humming, and that made him perplexed. Now it was the turn of the lion to be amused at the elephant's action. Moral: sometimes our fear is baseless. Change your view, not world. Once a king named Chandravahan ruled over an affluent country. One day he went to hunt animals to some remote area. When he returned back from the trip, he felt too exhausted to move anymore. He was sore after a long trip on the rough and gravel road of distant areas. It was his first trip on road, which pained him a lot. So he gave the order to cover the road of his entire country with leather. Definitely this was a very expensive task, to cover the road with leather in which the cow's skin was needed. Then one of his wise servants dared to tell the king, "Why do you have to spend that unnecessary amount of money? Why don't you just cut a little piece of leather to cover your feet?" The king was astounded on his suggestion, but later he agreed and decided to make a slipper of leather. Moral: to make the world a happy place to live in, you had better change yourself, your heart, and not the world. The perceptive child. A fragile and doddering man lived with his son, daughter-in-law, 4-year-old grandson. The old man's hand trembled, his eyesight was blurred, and his step faltered. The family ate together at the table, but the elderly grandfather's shaky hands and failing sight made eating difficult. Since the grandfather had broken a dish or two, his food was served in a wooden bowl. His grandson was perceptibly observing all this in silence. One evening before supper, the father noticed his son playing with wood scraps on the floor. He asked the child sweetly, "What are you making?" The boy said he was making a little bowl for the dad and mom to eat their food in when he would grow up. The words struck the parents terribly. They understood their fault and decided to lead the old man back to the family table. Moral: children perceptively observe their surroundings. A stranger in a garden. Once, after diligently hard work, a gardener happily went with his son to his garden to bring the fruit which he had been caring for a long time. As he reached there, he was astounded to see a stranger picking the fruits without informing anybody. He went berserk and shouted, "Hey you, what are you doing on my tree? Aren't you ashamed of stealing fruits?" The stranger replied, "Everything is of God, and I am God's servant." This answer baffled him, and again he shouted at the stranger, but the stranger continued picking fruits. After pondering, the gardener asked his son to bring a rope and a stick and began to beat the stranger. Stop, what are you doing? Don't you fear God?" The stranger cried horribly. "Like you, I am also God's servant, and this world belongs to God." The gardener prudently added, so you should not interfere in God's work. Then the stranger realized his mistake and apologized for his deed of stealing fruits. Moral: believe in your hard work only. The witty mother duck and a greedy fox. Once a mother duck with her ducklings was proceeding towards a lake. The ducklings happily followed their mother, quacking along the way. Suddenly she saw a fox in the distance. She got frightened and shouted to move hurriedly to the lake to her ducklings, as there's a fox. The duckling hurried toward the lake. The mother duck pondered what to do. She began to walk back and forth, dragging on wings of the ground. When the fox saw her, he became happy. He thought she seemed to be hurt, so I can catch and eat her. Then he ran towards her. The mother duck ran, leading the fox away from the lake. Now the ducklings were safe. They had reached the lake. She stopped and took a deep breath of relief. As soon as the fox was coming closer to her, she quickly spread her wings and flew away. Finally, she landed in the middle of the lake and joined the ducklings. The fox kept staring at them astonishingly. All mothers sacrifice for their children first. Moral: all mothers sacrifice for their children first. The fox and the grapes. It was such a scorching day that every animal could hardly get relief. One day a fox wandered across the jungle in order to get food. Soon he came to a vineyard which was laden with juicy grapes. The fox observed around him to confirm whether he was safe from the hunters or not. He was absolutely ravenous. So he decided to steal some grapes before everyone came along. He jumped again and again as high as he could, but couldn't reach the grapes. The grapes were too high for him. He was not ready to give up. He backed off, took some running steps, and leapt into the air towards the grapes. Again he failed to reach them. It was getting dark, and he was getting angry. His legs hurt with all that running and jumping. At last he stopped trying and walked away, saying he didn't want those grapes. They would be too sour to eat. Moral: we pretend something to be ugly if we do not get it. A assertive tortoise and a conceited hare. Once a tortoise met a hare who scornfully remarked, "How slowly you move." This remark made to agitate him to take an audacious decision. Tortoise said, "Let's have a race and see who's faster." The hare contemptuously laughed and said he would reach the other side of the hill first. Off he ran, leaving the tortoise far behind. After a while, the hare stopped to wait for the tortoise to come along. He waited and waited till he felt sleepy and decided to take a nap. He dozed under the shady tree and closed his eyes, envisaging, "Even if he would catch me, I can easily win the race." The tortoise continued the race slowly but steadily and passed the sleeping hare. By the time the hare woke up and ran as fast as he could, the tortoise had become the winner. Moral: confidence is good, but overconfidence may defeat you. Debt that cannot be paid off. Once a boy hurriedly came up to his mother in the kitchen and handed her a piece of paper that he had been writing on. Mother became astounded to see and read that in which money had been asked: for cutting the grass, $5; for cleaning the room, $1; for going to the store, 50 cents; for taking care of the baby while she had gone to market, 25 cents; taking out the garbage, $1; for getting a good report card, $5; for cleaning up and raking the yard, $2; total owed $14.75. On the back of the paper she wrote, "No charge for carrying 9 months in stomach. No charge for treatment and praying all night for you during illness. No charge for wiping your nose. No charge for fulfilling your requirements. Total cost nil." This writing choked the boy and overwhelmingly said, "Mum, I do love you." And then he took the pen and great big letters he wrote, "Paid in full." Moral: mother's love can't be repaid in money. The rock on a road. Once upon a time, a king had placed a boulder on a roadway. Then he hid himself and paused to see if anyone would remove the huge rock. Some of the king's wealthiest merchants and courtiers came by and simply walked around it. Many loudly blamed the king for not keeping the roads clear, but none did anything about getting the big stone out of the way. Then a peasant came along carrying a load of vegetables. Approaching the boulder, the peasant laid down his burden and tried to move the stone to the side of the road. After much pushing and straining, he finally succeeded, and the peasant picked up the load of vegetables. He noticed the purse lying in the road where the boulder had been. The purse contained many gold coins and a note from the king indicating that the gold was for the person who removed the boulder from the doorway. Roadway, the peasant learned that many others never understood. Work done selflessly always yields rich dividends. Wow! The son's crushed fingers. A man who brought a new car came to his house to show it to his wife who was working in the kitchen, but when they came out, they found their son ridiculously hammering a dent in the car. It really infuriated the father, who mercilessly hammered his son's hand into the pulp as punishment. As he got back his wit, he took his son to a nearby hospital where, in order to save his hand, the doctor finally had to ampute the fingers from the boy's both hands. When the boy woke up from the surgery and saw his bandaged stubs, he innocently said, "Daddy, I'm sorry, but when are my fingers going to grow back?" The incident tormented the father and he committed suicide. His one evil step not only spoiled the child's hand, but also snatched the father's hand from the child. Any action will take a rage may haunt us, so pause and ponder for a while to reach any decision. Any action we take in rage may haunt us, so pause and ponder for a while to reach any decision. Deafness become a boon. Once a group of frogs were living contentedly in the woods. Suddenly some frogs gathered around the pit, finding two of them had fallen into a deep pit. When they saw how deep the pit was, they dejectedly told the two frogs in the pit that they should prepare themselves for their fate. Because they were as good as dead, reluctantly, the two frogs began to jump with all their might. Some of the frogs shouted into the pit that it was hopeless and that the two frogs wouldn't have been in that situation if they had been more careful, more obedient. Listening to them, one of the two frogs into the pit lost hope and quietly resolved himself to his fate. He lay down at the bottom of the pit and died as the others looked on in helpless grief. But another frog kept struggling. Finally, he leapt so high that he sprang out of the pit. The amazed frog asked him why he kept jumping, as they told him it was impossible. Reading their lips, the astonished frog told them that he was deaf. Sometimes weakness becomes a strength. Wow! Depth of understanding. One day, a father of a very affluent family decided to take his son on a trip to show how the poor people lived, so he would be thankful for his wealth. They spent a couple of days with poor families. On their return from their trip, the father asked the son, "How was the trip?" "It was great, Dad." "Did you see how poor people can be?" The father asked, "Oh yeah. So what did you learn from the trip?" The boy said, "We have one dog, but they had four. We have a pool that reaches the middle of our garden, and they have a creek that has no end. We have imported lanterns in our garden, and they have stars at night. We have a small piece of land. They have fields beyond our sight. We buy our food, but they grow theirs. We have walls, but they have friends to protect." The boy thanked his father for showing how poor they were. Sometimes children can be the source of knowledge. Wow! The farmer and the stock. Finding a new uninvited cranes destroying his newly sown crops, a farmer set a net in his field in order to catch those destructive birds. Next day, when the farmer strode across the field to examine the net, he found that the net was full of cranes and his stock. Suddenly, the farmer heard a moaning voice of a stork who was imploring to release him. The stork innocently cried, "I'm a poor stork. I have not eaten your crops. I serve my parents with dutiful work." The stork pleaded for life, but the farmer cut him short. "All this may be true enough, but you have been caught with those destructive birds, so you must suffer the company in which you are found," asserted the farmer. Moral: company matters a lot for judgment. God on earth. Once a man started arguing about the existence of God on earth with a barber when he had gone to have the beard and hair cut in a barber shop. The barber said, "Look, man, I don't believe that God exists as you say so. If God existed, would there be so many sick people? Would there be abundant children? If God existed, There would be neither suffering nor pain. The barber finished his job and the client went out on the shop. Just after he had left the barber shop, he saw a man in the street with long hair and a beard. Then the client again entered the shop with a long bearded man and said to the barber, "You know barbers do not exist." "Well, I'm here and I'm a barber." "No, they don't exist, because if they did, there would be no people with long hair and beards like that man who walks in the street." Moral: it's not necessary to go to God to get his blessings. Holes in the fence. There was a boy who had bad temper. His father gave him a bag of nails and told him he must hammer a nail in the back of the fence every time he lost his temper. The first day the boy had driven 37 nails into the fence. Soon the number of nails hammered daily gradually dwindled down as he learned to control his anger. He found easy to control his temper. Finally, the day came when the boy didn't lose his temper. He told his father about it. Now his father told him to pull out one nail for each day that he was able to hold his temper. The day passed and the young boy was finally able to tell his father that all the nails were gone. The father took his son by the hand and led him to the fence and showed the irreplaceable holes made by the driven nails, which looked ugly. Father made him understand, when you say things in anger, they leave a scar. Moral: we should never say anything in bad temper, it may hurt others. Good. Lesson for actual life. Once a boy with his father was walking on a mountain. The boy inquisitively asked his father many questions about the world. Suddenly, he surprisingly heard a voice repeating somewhere in the mountain, "Aha!" just as he has screamed when he had got injured. He curiously asked, "Who are you?" He received the answer, "Who are you?" And then he screamed to the mountain, "I admire you." He heard, "I admire you." Then angrily he screamed, "Coward!" He received the same. He looked at his father and asked, "What is going on?" His father explained, "This is called, but really this is life. Our life is simply a reflection of our actions. If you want more love in the world, create more love in your heart. If you want more competence in your team, improve your competence. Moral: as you sow, so shall you reap. Love for the mentally retarded. A few years ago, at the Seattle Special Olympics, 9 contestants, all physically or mentally disabled, assembled at the starting line for the 100 meters race. As the fire of the gun, they started with a relish to run the race to the finish and win. One little boy among them stumbled on the asphalt, tumbled and began to cry. The other 8 heard the boy crying and slowed down to look back. Rather than winning the race, they all went to soothe him. One girl with Down syndrome bent down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked together to the finish line. Everyone in the stadium applauded for them. That gave them real triumph. Thus they set an example for those who were present there. Moral: to please your surroundings is never less than to get a trophy in a race, even if you slow down in real competitions. Wow! The precious gift. Once a young boy was going to get a graduation degree. For many months he had been admiring a beautiful sports car in a dealer's showroom. Knowing his father could well afford it, he told him that was all he wanted. He was sure that he would have that car as a gift from his father. On the morning of his graduation, his father called him and handed a beautiful wrapped gift box. He inquisitively opened the gift, but finding a leather-bound Holy Quran, he acrimoniously threw that and he stormed out of the house. He never contacted his father for many years. But one day he immediately left for his house after reading the deplorable letter by his father's demise. He found his father lying lifeless. He regretted on his act by knowing the fact of Holy Quran, which contained a key in the car in it. He was astonished to see the date of the delivery of the car, which was purchased on the graduation day. Now he realized how caring father he had lost. Moral: always respect your parents' decisions. The ant and the dog. In the scorching hot day, an ant was walking around in searching of water. After some time, she reached a spring where she had to climb up a blade of grass. She slipped and fell into the water while making her way up. She could have been drowned if a dove up a nearby tree had not seen her. Seeing the ant in trouble, the dog quickly dropped a leaf into the water near the struggling ant. Now the ant was saved, which made her indebted to the dove. A profound intimacy developed between them that sustained till end. Time passed happily. One day a deplorable condition occurred with the arrival of a hunter who had caught that dove, but the ant remembered the dove's favor and bit on the heel of the hunter. The inflamed heel made him to drop his net. Now the dog was quick to fly away. One good turn is rewarded with another. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Wow. Okay. The Dreamer Milkmaid. Taking a large container of milk on her head, a milkmaid was on her way for selling it. As her steps were moving toward the market, her inclination toward wealth was being enhanced. A surge of excitement of money by selling the milk was noticeable. She began to dream how she would use that money. She was murmuring the words and moving her hands. Her dream took her in a different world, and she said to herself, the money after selling the milk would be used for purchasing 100 chicks, and when chicks would be fully grown, I would sell them at a good price for buying 2 goats. When the goats would be fully grown, I would sell them to an even better price. Still dreaming, she said to herself, soon I would be able to buy 2 more cows, and I would have a lot of money with a luxurious life. With these happy thoughts, she began to skimp and jump. Suddenly, she tripped and fell. The jug broke, and all the milk split on the ground. No more dream, she cried foolishly. Moral: do not count your chickens before they are hatched. The Parched Crow. In the scorching hot day, a crow flew for a long time hither and thither, looking for water. He felt too exhausted, almost gave up hope when he couldn't find any water. Suddenly he saw a pitcher in a field. The pitcher had meager water. He found impossible to touch the level of water. He tried again and again but couldn't. But his witty mind got an idea. Looking around, he saw some pebbles. He suddenly started picking up the pebbles one by one, dropping each into the pitcher at the level of the water was moving up. His surge of enthusiasm was also increasing as well. Now the level of water was up enough to touch with his beak. The crow glugged down the water and his thirst was quenched. Soon his satiety he got by his wit, and idea made him really proud of himself. Moral: one can reach a final destination if one tries hard. Beautiful. The Clever Lamb and the Strong Wolf. Once a lamb was taking pleasure of sweet grass at the edge of the field with a flock of sheep. She was enjoying herself so much